Great, thanks everyone for waiting and checking out the tables and everything. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Justin. I'm an organizer with Kshama Sawant's Independent Socialist Campaign for Congress. We're all here today because the rent is too damn high, am I right? Housing is one of the biggest expenses in many working people's lives because wealthy corporate landlords jack up the rents to maximize their profits even when we can't afford it. And when we talk about renters, it's not just people living in apartments. We've talked to people living in mobile homes, in trailer parks who have to rent their lot space. Small businesses face sky-high rents that are constantly driving them to the brink of bankruptcy. And not to mention, many people renting now would actually prefer to buy a home, but those prices are outrageous and out of reach for most working people. The Republican and Democratic parties are tied at the hip to the for-profit housing developers, the corporate landlords, the real estate companies, and the investment banks. And these wealthy interests donate huge amounts of money to political candidates from both of these parties in order to make sure the laws are stacked in their favor. They're the ones who've created the housing crisis. They're the reason why homelessness has risen nationwide over recent decades. So I want to do some chants to get the fighting energy going in this room. So when I say the rent is, you're going to respond too damn high because that's the truth. So here we go. The rent is. The rent is. The rent is. So the. So the main point of our event today is to talk about how do we lower that rent and how do we win taxes on the rich to fund a massive expansion of publicly owned affordable housing. How do we make housing affordable for working people? But we cannot ignore the fact that the focus of many working people around the country right now is fighting back against the brutality and terror that Trump's ICE agents are inflicting on our communities. So we'll be discussing that as well and how rank and file union members can organize for a general strike to shut down ICE. So to kick off this discussion, our main speaker is a revolutionary socialist who has gone to war for working people for over a decade in Seattle and nationally. She used her Seattle City Council office to launch and lead movements to win the nation's highest minimum wage, the Amazon tax, and many historic renters' rights laws. As a city council member, she only took home the average worker's wage, donating the rest after taxes to labor union strike funds and movements for workers and against oppression. She's now running for Congress as an independent socialist. If elected, she would become the first ever revolutionary socialist in Congress. Electing Kshama to Congress will be the kind of breakthrough we desperately need for the working class nationally. Welcome, Kshama Sawant.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this important discussion. We are facing a genocide, war upon imperialist war, ICE terror in cities across the nation, tens of millions of working people and their families barely able to pay for their groceries, facing healthcare in utter shambles, shocking cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and other social programs at the federal, state, county, and city levels. And if all of that was not bad enough, rent is skyrocketing. To illustrate the devastation across America from the combined effect of all of this, of jobs that don't pay enough, healthcare, groceries, transportation, schools, all these costs going sky high, welfare programs being cut to the bone. To look at all of this, I want to use one variable as the illustrator, and that is eviction filings. Eviction filings are when the landlord tells the court, you need to evict this family. Evictions of families facing financial hardship are among the most despicable actions that occur under capitalism. To quote Andrew Scherer, a professor of housing policy and tenant justice in New York Law School, this is a quote by him, an armed official with a gun orders the family out of the home and removes their possessions, often simply placing the family's belongings photos, knickknacks, furniture, the accumulations of a life on the sidewalk to be lost or damaged. Evictions ravage lives. They damage physical and mental health, disrupt education, cause job loss and homelessness, and dislodge people from community and stability. The violence of eviction is always implicit and often explicit. Just to give a sense of numbers, these are numbers from last year, 2025. Clayton County, Georgia, saw over 92,000 eviction filings. Bronx County, New York, saw 200,000 eviction filings. And the eviction filing rate in both those cases was nearly 40%, which means 40 out of every 100 households received an eviction notice. And we're seeing similar increases in King County as well right here. And this is a problem across the nation. Evictions have been spiking sky high because of rising rents coupled with wages that are not keeping up and a lack of affordability on the whole. Who are the big evictors, by the way? That's a very important question to ask. So if you think of the average small household as a landlord who owned just about a unit, one rental unit, and if you compare that to a large landlord who own at least 55 rental homes, then look at this statistic. Large landlords filed evictions 186% more often than small landlords. Medium landlords, who are not the big corporations but still are small corporations, they filed eviction notices, evictions 55% more often than small landlords. I want to be honest with you, as a socialist, I don't think any working class people should be forced to pay rent to anyone else. I believe, and I think we all should believe, and I do think that most working class people agree with this, that all of this should be publicly owned because we all work hard and we all have to suffer, and so we don't agree with having to pay rent to anybody, whether it's a small landlord or big landlord. We believe all renters deserve the same rights. But I am stating that statistic in order to make the point that as a strategy, we are here, as Justin said, we are here to discuss a strategy of how to win. A part of that strategy has to be for us as renters to understand how to win over people other working class people who own their own homes and are not renters, and also small landlords, just like small businesses, who could be won over. I want to be sober. I don't think we're going to win over most of the small landlords, but we do want to win over as many as we can. And that is why it is important for us to be armed with the knowledge of the distinction between how small landlords treat their tenants and how rapacious and plundering the large landlords are. There are lots of big corporations. Just to name one, Blackstone Corporation. Has anybody heard about Blackstone Corporation? It's the largest owner of apartment units. They own over 230,000. I think this number is even this number is outdated. And then of course there's Greystar. Have you heard of Greystar? Invitation Homes, Progress Residential. I mean, these names are Orwellian. There's nothing inviting about a company that's waiting to evict you and your family. And so these are the corporations that profit hand over fist from exploiting renters. And I'm going to come back to Blackstone in a second. In contrast to what has happened to working class renters across the nation, what did we do in the 10 years that we had our city council office? We won a list of renters' rights victories that is actually in fact, this doesn't encapsulate all of it, but I just want to name a few. We capped late rent fees at $10 a month, period. We won a 6-month notice for rent increases. We require, when I say we are in Kent, but I was on the city council in Seattle, so these are Seattle laws, but these are examples of what we need to win. But in Seattle, we won a law, believe it or not, a law that says that if a landlord raises your rent as a tenant by 10% or more and you are forced to leave because of that rent increase, that landlord owes you 3 months' worth of rent. Have you ever heard of anything like this? We banned winter evictions, which means right now it is against the law for any landlord in Seattle to evict any tenant because it's winter months. And we also won, for the first time, publicly funded attorneys, right to a lawyer for any renter facing eviction, because it makes a huge difference whether you have a lawyer on your side or not, in whether the judge rules that you get evicted or not. I mean, it is a night and day difference. I mean, literally 90% of evictions don't go through in court if you have a lawyer who is trained to deal with it on your behalf as a tenant. And so we won many other laws, which I hope others will talk about, because it will take a long time to mention all of those. But I wanted to mention other things. We won, in addition to winning the laws in the through city council votes, we also won other victories by organizing tenants in specific buildings, because they came to us saying, we want to fight. Can you organize a fight alongside us? And in December of 2014, we won a stunning victory against a federal attempt. This came from Washington, D.C., attempt to destroy social housing, publicly owned affordable housing, on a grand scale. This nationwide program was called Moving to Work, again an Orwellian name, a neoliberal assault on the little remaining public and affordable housing. The Seattle incarnation of this program to drag affordable housing backward was called Stepping Forward. I mean, it was really stepping backward. In fact, at that time, we had a chant. We said, stepping backwards, stepping backwards. I remember that. If Stepping Forward had been allowed to succeed, it would have increased rents for 4,600 working class and poor families, many of them immigrant and probably who are being targeted by ICE right now, by an eye-popping 400% over 6 years. And every time I mention this, people ask me, are you speaking correctly? Is it 400% or 40%? No, it was 400% rent increase. To quote Rebecca Snow Landa, at that time, one of the tenants, she was a working class mom, she said, when I got that letter, I could barely get out of bed for about a week because it almost felt like a death sentence. This program was presented to the tenants almost as a fait accompli. Well, it's going to happen, just get with the program, go get better jobs and all that. But the tenants, many of them East African moms and their children, they were unanimous in refusing to accept this lying down, and they wanted to fight alongside our office against what they knew was a pipeline to homelessness. And we made it clear, this is a pipeline to homelessness. So together with all of the tenants, we brought other organizations as well, and we organized meetings expecting, we organized the tenants, and the Seattle Housing Authority, which is the federal sort of organ in Seattle that maintains these housing and was trying to carry out Stepping Forward. They thought that the tenants would not be confident to oppose Stepping Forward, but what they saw was the exact opposite. I mean, I still remember the electric feeling we had when we were organizing tenants who could barely speak English, who had never held a placard, who had never chanted. We organized them into a force to reckon with. We turned every public meeting into a protest action, with tenants interrupting the establishment speakers repeatedly with chants and statements. And then all of these protest actions, I mean, they had held these meetings across, they call them information sessions or whatever. We turned them into protests, but they had organized them all across the city. We went to each one of them, and each one of it was like a crescendo, a protest crescendo. Every next meeting was a larger protest, and all of that culminated with the last meeting where we organized an incredible walkout of hundreds of these tenants from the meeting, and then we held our own powerful people's assembly in a community center basketball court. And under our pressure, the Democratic City Council members were forced to come out in public opposition. I mean, they came out in very mealy-mouthed ways, but they were forced to say, this can't go through. And so we defeated Stepping Forward because of the pressure of our campaign. It was a historic victory because remember, it was a federal program, and to our knowledge, Seattle was the only city where the Moving to Work initiative was defeated. And so the moral of the story is we did this by us, myself, my fellow revolutionary socialists, the union members, and other militant workers who were fighting alongside my office, by us using our elected office to organize, to mobilize working class people en masse. One of the corporate landlord lobbyists, he said it, Jamie Durkin, he's the brother of a former corporate mayor, Jenny Durkin, he said it really well. He said that he was forced to acknowledge publicly that in the 10 years that we were in City Hall, this is not an exaggeration, that the corporate landlords simply could not win. They could not win. We kept winning victory after victory for working class tenants, and corporate landlords couldn't get one thing through. And he admitted, and he had to admit publicly that they weren't able to win, the corporate landlords weren't able to win because of what he called Sawant's army. And that encapsulates a very fundamental lesson for us. They don't fear one person. What they do fear, however, is if that one person is the kind of leader who is willing to organize the masses and bring the latent working class power to the fore. That is what we did, and that is what they fear, and that is what we have to keep doing it. And what did the Democrats do? I mean, related to all of this story about our army is what the Democrats did, right? There were 8 Democrats on the city council, many of them calling themselves progressive. We were one socialist. What did the Democrats do? They put forward obstacles at every step of the way whenever we were fighting for any progressive demand. And each time, first, the machinations would be behind the scenes, and on camera, they would say, well, I don't disagree with Councilmember Sawant, but this is not the time. We need robust studies. We need stakeholder meetings. Let's form a subcommittee. All of this is code for, we don't want you to win anything. And we didn't accept any of that, and obviously we fought back. But the other way in which the Democrats try to undermine us, and this is often really invisible, but it is one of the most insidious, if not the most insidious mechanisms by which they try to undermine movements, is that they try to get the leaders of the tenant organizations against us by trying to get them to parrot these talking points of, oh, how we need a robust study. Oh, let's not chant in the city council. That's not nice. Let's be nice. Let's not impugn the intent of any politician here. So by bringing in civility politics and respectability politics, they try to undermine the movement. And, they almost succeeded sometimes because it is not clear to often, working people think, well, the leader of this or that organization, surely they must be on our side because they say tenants' rights in their whatever manifesto. So how come they could be not on our side? And that is a very important lesson from our 10 years on the city council. We have to beware gatekeepers. And what we mean by gatekeepers are people who look like us, who may say that they are on our side, and yet what they are actually doing is trying to betray us. That is because we were clear about the role being played by gatekeepers that we were able to win. And when the Democratic council members didn't succeed in any of all of these efforts, then they attempted to eke out every single watering down amendment that they could in favor of corporate landlords. They are relentless on behalf of the wealthy. And so the only way we can fight back is if we are equally, if not more, relentless on behalf of working class people. And let's be clear, some of these watering down amendments were brought by self-described Latina progressive women like Lorena Gonzalez and Teresa Mosqueda. So we have to recognize that gatekeepers come in every color, shape, size. Look at the politics. Don't look at what they look like. But it's not just in Seattle. What did the Democrats in Washington State do? The Democratic Party in Washington State has kept the ban on rent control by cities, cities' right to do rent control. They have kept that ban intact since 1981, which is nearly half a century and certainly longer than many of you have been alive. And then in California, we saw the very, very destructive statewide Costa-Hawkins Act of 1995, which was named after Democratic Senator Jim Costa and Republican Assembly member Phil Hawkins. This is, when they say bipartisan, we should shudder. Because when they go bipartisan, that spells bad news for us. Bipartisan means ICE terror. Bipartisan means genocide. Bipartisan means attacks on renters. Bipartisan means we don't get minimum wage increases. We don't get affordable health care or universal health care. We don't get canceling of student debt. That's what bipartisan means for them. And so, and what did the Democrats do in Washington, D.C.? That moving to work program I mentioned, where we won the only victory against it in Seattle, who do you think put that in place? It was Barack Obama. It was in 2014. It's not all Barack Obama did against renters. Remember that when the Great Recession happened, it was George W. Bush, Republican, and then Barack Obama, Democrat. It spanned two administrations when the Great Recession happened. Who got bailed out after that recession? Yes, exactly. The big banks, the big corporations, they got bailed out, and we all got sold out. Working people got sold out. And in all of that, and keep in mind, our opponent, Adam Smith, he voted for every single one of those bills. Yes. The single largest, in all of these bills where the banks got bailed out, the single largest instance of daylight robbery on working class housing, in my view, in the last 50 years, was also by Obama, which was when he, there were nearly 6 million foreclosures of working class homeowners that happened. And what did Obama and the Democrats and Republicans together do? Again, bipartisan. They allowed large private equity firms to swoop in and buy up tens of thousands of foreclosed single-family homes. And that was one of the ugliest parts of that bailout. In fact, what they did, what does this bailout mean? It means that the government gave guarantees to the loans that these big banks applied for in order to acquire those millions upon millions of homes that working people had been foreclosed upon. And what that means specifically is that Freddie Mac, which is the government, nation's largest rental housing financier, they basically gave securities at a lower yield, which in other words, it means that it is cheap financing to corporations who were able to buy the homes at pennies to the dollar. Big fucking robbery. And which was the corporation that benefited the most from all of this? Blackstone. Exactly. And so I think that I wanted to talk about Blackstone in relation to the Democratic Party, because we need to be crystal clear. We need to be crystal clear that the entire Democratic Party, it is not just Adam Smith, the entire Democratic Party is bought by the big corporations, by the billionaires and multimillionaires. So what would we do if we won this congressional election, and what's at stake here for us, which is why we need every single one of you here, young and old, no matter where you live, whether you live in Kent or Federal Way or Seattle, we need you to come out campaigning with us, because what's at stake is the potential to win national rent control. And what type of rent control are we talking about? We're talking about residential rent control. We're also talking about commercial rent control for the struggling small businesses, many of whom are struggling. Also, we are talking about actual rent control, meaning no rents never going up more than the prevailing inflation rate. And we're also talking about, we're basically talking about zero loophole rent control. So in other words, we're also talking about it doesn't matter what kind of rental home it is, whether you are renting a room in a home, as with your roommates, whether you're renting a single-family home or an apartment or what you mentioned, mobile homes. Yes, somehow I couldn't think of that. Yes, mobile homes. It doesn't matter what kind of home you have. Rent control, the kind of rent control we want to fight for and win is going to be that type of rent control. But we should know, of course, that it is going to be far from easy to win this. And for that, first we have to win this election campaign. And that is why we need every person out here with us. And I'll just end on this. All of this is also very immediately, in a very immediate sense, connected with our fight back against ICE terror. Justin mentioned we need a general strike. Millions of people agree with us. So my question is, why isn't the general strike happening yet? It's because most of the labor leadership has completely betrayed the working class, refusing to call for a general strike. And the reason they're refusing is that they don't want to get crosswise with the bosses themselves. They also don't want to get crosswise with the Democratic Party, which most of these labor leaders are tied at the hip to. So all of this shows that the barrier for us to actually change the course of society right now is not that, oh, millions of people aren't angry. We have to wait for them to be angry. No, they are angry. In fact, the consciousness of the American working class right now is like dry kindling. People are just raring to fight back. And there have been protests across the nation. But protests are not going to accomplish what we need to accomplish without the kind of leadership that's needed. Leadership that is uncompromised by relationships with all the powers that be, whether it's the Democrats and Republicans or the billionaires and multimillionaires themselves. Leadership that understands that unless we show real courage, that we are not going to win. Leadership, and this is the most important, leadership that understands that in order to actually harness the power that we have in the working class, we have to shut down the profit machine of the bosses. And for that, you need leadership that has proven itself to not have been doing any wheeling and dealing with the bosses. And that is why the only way we can have the kind of actions we can have, we need to have, like a general strike, like a mass movement to win rent control, like a mass movement to end all U.S. military aid to Israel, a mass movement to win free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich. We need breakthroughs like ours in Seattle. We need to take that Seattle breakthrough national. That is why this election campaign is so crucial. It's a unique election campaign because it is the only election campaign that is not about a candidate's career, but about using the election campaign itself, and hopefully if we can win the elected office as in service of the working class, using it as a vehicle to fight for the mass of working class. And alongside all our demands for our congressional campaign, we are also demanding that the Seattle City Council roll back the city's massive surveillance network, which has been a gift on a platter to Trump's ICE. We are demanding that the Seattle City Council ban all local agencies from sharing any data with ICE and enforce the law with serious penalties, including firing agency heads. And we are also demanding a ban on the eviction of families targeted by ICE. And we will very likely organize public comment actions in Seattle. But I just want to explain one last thing. It doesn't matter where you live. If you are able to, if it doesn't conflict with your job work hours, we need you to come out to Seattle City Council, because the reality is that if we can win in one city, win any of these demands in one city, we can actually win in other cities in King County. So whether you live in Kent or Federal Way or Renton, you should still join us when we announce those public comment actions. Please volunteer alongside us. Please donate. Please share information about this campaign with your friends, family, co-worker, neighbors, whoever you think is desperate for a way to fight back. And let's make sure that we give Adam Smith, one of the guys who voted to create ICE and fund ICE, let's give him something. Yeah, we need to get him out. But just one last thing I'll say is that, we should not expect that the Democratic Party is just going to, just shrug their, like throw their hands up and say, oh, well, yeah, I guess a revolutionary socialist is running. We can't do anything about it. No, we should expect them to come up with all kinds of tricks and other kinds of maneuvers. And one possible maneuver they might try to run is run a quote-unquote progressive candidate against us and say, oh yeah, if it's not palatable for you to. That is why the game changer that the working class needs is not going to be won by some progressive Democrat winning. The game changer will be electing the first ever revolutionary socialist to the US Congress. Solidarity.
All right, thank you so much, Kshama. That was incredible. So we're going to follow up that with another chant. When I say, what do we want? You say rent control. What do we want? Rent control. What do we want? Rent control. What do we want? Rent control. Awesome. Our next speaker participated in many of Kshama Sawant's Seattle City Council election campaigns and in the historic movements she led for renters' rights. He's been a rank-and-file member of the teachers' union for years and has been part of the effort to rebuild a fighting labor movement that is ready to take this kind of strike action we need. He's now an organizer with Kshama's Independent Socialist Campaign for Congress. Welcome, Joe Sugrue.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Like Justin said, my name is Joe. I'm a music teacher. I'm a member of Workers Strike Back, and I'm also working for the Kshama for Congress campaign. Yeah, thank you for being here. I've lived in Seattle for 7 years now and fought alongside Kshama during many campaigns. I've also fought alongside Kshama to fight for better funding for public schools, against budget cuts in the last district I worked for, and I can attest that she is the most serious and effective fighter for union members and really the whole working class. Give it up for Kshama Sawant. We are here to elect her as the first ever revolutionary socialist to the U.S. Congress. And as you know, winning this campaign will take resources. And we're going up against the Democratic Party machine and the billionaire class. So today, I'm going to ask you all to donate to help build this campaign. Kshama has never taken a dime in corporate cash, and this campaign is no different. Everyone here, every single one of us here is going up against the billionaires. We can win. We can win. But that will take resources. We know what that's like as working class people. You need money to do shit, right? We need money to win this campaign. Yep. So during Kshama's decade on the Seattle City Council, she did something for the working class, has been totally unique in our times. Rather than build a career for herself by refusing to challenge the billionaires and the Democratic Party politicians who represent them, Kshama used her office to go to war against them. She did this by launching and leading mass movements that defeated the bosses to win victories like the nation's highest minimum wage, the Amazon tax, and loads of renters' rights victories. Yeah. This financial appeal may take a little longer if we keep clapping, but please keep clapping. Do it. We need the energy up. Here we go. This is what made Kshama and Seattle's working people such a threat to big business and the Democratic Party. They continued to win, and so the establishment viciously attacked her and tried to remove her from office again and again. In 2021, billionaires and the right wing launched a recall campaign against Kshama. Not a single Democratic politician even spoke out against the recall. And in fact, the Democrats were getting ready to celebrate Kshama's ousting from office. Even the courts, allowed the recall campaign to use voter suppression tactics, like they scheduled the election for a special election in December. The recall effort raised $1 million from billionaires and real estate developers to try and force her out. But we fought back. We matched them dollar for dollar through working class donations, knocked on tens of thousands of doors, raised over $1 million ourselves, and we defeated this recall attempt and won. In this campaign today, we are up against millions of dollars from the weapons manufacturers, health insurance companies, and Trump-supporting billionaires who are backing Kshama's opponent, Democrat Adam Smith. One of those people is Joe Lonsdale. Lonsdale is a billionaire, co-founder of the dystopian surveillance company Palantir. We all know Palantir, right? Palantir's backing Adam Smith. He has pushed legislation to criminalize and terrorize homeless people and has donated $1 million to Trump's super PAC. Recently, he advocated for bringing back public hangings. Yeah, this guy's despicable. He's donated $1,000 to Adam Smith's campaign, and he's likely to donate even more. But these are the kinds of people we're up against. We want to start canceling out his current donation today. So the maximum amount of money an individual can give during this primary election is $3,500. Has anyone here already donated $1,000 or more to our campaign? Please raise your hands. That's awesome. Give it up for those folks. So with that being said, can anybody here today donate $1,000 to our revolutionary campaign? That's okay. We have to ask, right? So if you can't give $1,000 now, completely understandable. However, $1,000 in 6 months payment plan would be $166 a month. Is there anybody who can give $166 a month for 6 months? Yeah, not exactly like in one lump sum, but we should absolutely talk about hosting a fundraiser. Because we can do that, and we can talk about that afterwards. Absolutely. In fact, I think someone's already talking to you about hosting a fundraiser. So let's talk more about Kshama's opponent, genocidal Democrat Adam Smith. Smith has been in office for nearly 30 years, and he's sold out the working class for every single one of them. He voted for the war in Iraq and countless other wars. Adam Smith voted with George W. Bush to literally create ICE and has voted to fund ICE over and over again. And I'm only getting a little emotional right now, but I'll be all right. Because I was thinking when Kshama was speaking just now and everyone was talking about bailing out the banks, how that messed up my own family. So screw you, Adam Smith, for bailing out the banks. We're going to beat you. One of Adam Smith's first acts in Congress was to cut $150 billion from Medicare and Medicaid. He voted to break the railroad strike in 2022. He has voted for tens of billions of dollars to fund the genocide that continues to take place in Gaza. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, he has voted repeatedly to defund United Nations food aid to Gaza. Adam Smith has the blood of millions of people on his hands. And for this, he has been rewarded by the war profiteers and the Zionist lobby. Among Democrats in the House, Adam Smith is the #1 recipient of war industry donations. The pro-Israel, lobby group AIPAC was his biggest donor in the last election. Shame. But it's not just Adam Smith. It's the Democratic Party as a whole. Not a single Democrat, not even the supposedly progressive ones, are fighting against Trump's attacks on Venezuela or taking a clear anti-war position with Iran. If Kshama is elected, it will be an absolute game changer because there's no one else in Congress who's standing up for working people against both parties of Wall Street, war, and imperialism. Kshama's election will be an unprecedented breakthrough for the anti-war movement. She will use her office to build mass movements and pose a serious threat to the warmongering Democrats and Republicans. Working people everywhere have a stake in this campaign to elect Kshama to Congress so that she can lead that fight on a national scale. Can anybody here give $500 to our campaign today? That would be $83 a month for the next 6 months. Is there anybody who could raise their hand and commit to that? $83 for 6 months. No problem. It's a lot of money, I know. When Kshama ran her first campaign for Seattle City Council in 2013, she campaigned on a number of working class demands, including raising the city's minimum wage to $15 an hour. And at the time, this was called by Democratic Party politicians and the media as utopian. They literally said that. Yet 6 months after she took office in 2014, the movement that she led won the nation's first major city $15 minimum wage. And the wage has changed from $9.19 an hour at that time in 2015 to $21.30 an hour now in 2026. That's an increase of over 131%. We can see the consequences of not having working class fighters like Kshama in leadership. The federal minimum wage is still $7.25. We need Kshama in Congress. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. Because she is a fighter. We need fighters who are willing to go up against the establishment and fight unambiguously for bold demands for working people. Right now, Kshama is using her campaign to build momentum for a $25 an hour federal minimum wage, which should be even more in major cities. And of course, like we're talking about today, Kshama is campaigning for national rent control with no loopholes, so your landlord cannot raise your rent. She has pledged that she will turn her inauguration into a mass rally of 10,000 people in Washington, D.C. to launch an all-out fight to win free health care for all by taxing the rich and an end to U.S. military aid to Israel. Exactly. So can anybody here give $250 today to our campaign? For the next 6 months, thank you so much. For the next 6 months, that would be $41.66 a month. Is there anybody who could give $250 over the next 6 months? Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. During her time in office, Kshama took home only the average workers of I love that. Thank you so much. That's awesome. These are real sacrifices, but they will make a difference. I can't think of any other place you should be putting your money right now other than, your own expenses than this political campaign. During her time in office, Kshama took home only the average worker's wage. After taxes, she took home between $40,000 and $50,000 a year and donated the rest of her lavish six-figure salary, that's what the city council members were making, to strike funds and social movements. That is completely unique. There is no other elected representative who does this. And Kshama has pledged to absolutely do this again were she to be elected to Congress. Who here today can donate $100 to help elect a relentless fighter to Congress? Awesome. Awesome. That's fantastic. I've named some pretty big amounts here today, but the vast majority of our campaign donations are much smaller. The median donation to this campaign is $25. And in fact, yesterday at the Ice Out protest, we were there yesterday, we got 15 donations for about $393, which was an average of $26. It's the truth. Through thousands of working class donations, Kshama's past campaigns broke all fundraising records in Seattle without taking a dime in corporate cash. And like I mentioned earlier, the Kshama Solidarity Campaign, which was when we defeated the right-wing recall to remove her from office, raised over $1 million. We'll have to do that again several times over to defeat Democratic Party politician Adam Smith. And because of the sacrifices of working people, our campaign has already raised over $400,000. So I have one final ask for anyone who hasn't donated yet or hasn't donated yet today. Who here can donate? And if you can't, please raise your hand and someone will help you out. $50, $25, $15, a single dollar, or any other amount of money to help fund this anti-genocide, pro-working class campaign. Awesome. Phenomenal. Thank you. And make sure that you talk to somebody. Someone with a clipboard will come around. Make sure you talk to them. These are real sacrifices that everybody is making today, and that's what it's going to take. With the working class dollars we raised today and that you pledged over the next few months, And with the thousands of working class volunteer hours we need to get involved over the coming months, we are going face to face with the billionaires and their two parties. We are going to build our independent socialist movement to defeat Adam Smith and elect Kshama Sawant to Congress. Thank you very much, everybody, in solidarity.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. Fundraising is absolutely crucial to power this campaign, but we need people to get involved as well. This is a grassroots campaign. We need you all to help us talk to more working people about the importance of this campaign and Kshama's track record. And this is much easier than you think. So, I mean, it's been mentioned quite a few times today, but when I'm out canvassing and talking to someone about Kshama, I always mention early on that she only took the average worker's wage during her decade on the Seattle City Council. And, that she donated the rest after taxes to labor union strike funds and movements for workers and against oppression. Basically, everyone I've told this has a visible reaction. Their eyes get wide and their head kind of goes back, like in shock. Because they've never heard about this from any other elected official before, right? It's totally unique. And it's just another way that Kshama has consistently proven her accountability. Working people are looking for leaders who will fight for them unambiguously rather than building a comfortable career like what they see from virtually every other politician. There are lots of ways you can get involved. We do postering, tabling, door knocking, and phone banking. Who here would like to sign up to volunteer with us today? Awesome. All right, there's the volunteers going around also have those sign-up sheets on the clipboard. Those forms also include some other options, like putting up a Kshama for Congress yard sign. Very easy thing to do. We have the yard signs right over there. Also, if you're in a union, you can sign up to fight for an endorsement for Kshama from your union. So get a form from a volunteer if you want to sign up for those as well. There are many other ways to get involved. We all know other working people and renters who would very likely agree with many of the demands that Kshama is talking about, like ending all military aid to Israel, like shutting down ICE, like national rent control. So my next question is pretty easy, but who here knows 5 other people? I should see literally every hand up, right? I mean, everyone has to know at least 5 other people. You need that to survive. So we've had success in our past campaigns through organizing what we call house parties. And this is for the person there who wanted to get other people involved. Those are in which our supporters bring together people who are likely to support our campaign for an informal gathering with some political discussion and often questions for Kshama and ultimately a donation appeal. Our campaign organizers can help with all the logistical work of holding the event. The main thing would be that we need from people is, can you get at least 5 people to attend? We could do it either, people do it at their own place, or we can find another location or do it over Zoom. Who here can sign up to host a house party today? Yeah, picnic sounds really fun. Awesome. Definitely talk with someone more afterwards about getting that organized. So an easier version of this is what we call our 5 friends and family ask. This involves just individually reaching out to people to motivate them of the importance of Kshama as a working class fighter and asking them to donate and get involved. One example is, you could reach out to them right after this town hall and talk about the event with them, right? Bring in your own personal experience with this campaign and why you're supporting. Could anyone here, make a plan, and we have, sheets for this that we can pass out, to talk to 5 people about our campaign and try to get them involved in donating? All right, I see a few people. Nice. Awesome. So just be on the lookout, flag down volunteers now or later on, and they can get you signed up for those things. So, so next we're going to go to our public comment portion to have people come in with questions or other contributions for the discussion. So I'll explain how that's going to work. I'll be creating a list of people who want to speak, and we'll go through that list And you'll have to come up to the front because we only have this one microphone, but we'll give people about 4 minutes to say whatever you want to say, and there will be a timekeeper up here letting you know. Natalie's going to let you know when you have 1 minute left and when you should wrap up. To get yourself added to the list of people who want to speak, we'll have people raise their hands. So I'll keep a list up here, and then I'll ask your names so that I have something to write down for the list. And yeah, depending on how many people want to speak, we may not have time to get to everyone, but you can always talk with someone from the campaign after the event is over as well. So yeah, again, if you want to speak, I'll just take down a list of people who raise their hands. And once we have a few people, we'll get started with that. Just some ideas if, you might be interested in speaking, but, don't know what about yet. You could talk about what are the issues you have faced as a renter, right? All kinds of apartment complexes have all kinds of problems. One of the big ones being the rent is too high, of course, but there's many others. Do you have a question for Kshama to answer at the end? If you're a longtime Kshama supporter, which I see a few of you here, could you elaborate on any of the movements she led in Seattle? People can also talk about other issues, like how to fight back against the brutality of Trump's ICE department that we've already talked about, is terrorizing working people around our country. And after the discussion, Kshama will come up again to answer any points that came up. So, yeah, I'll sit back down, and then, yeah, does anyone know that they want to speak already?
Hi, everyone. My name is Bruce. Hey, I wanted to talk about the rent control. And one of the things I'm not hearing on the news is high rent, excessive rent. It's really bad for business. It's bad for the economy. And, I hear things that, if you do rent control, the apartments are going to go out of business. But, and I do understand at the state level, the rent controls controlled by the state legislator, and there's a end run around it that in the cities, if the cities build their own housing, they can control their own rent. So my question, yes it is, if the housing is owned by the city, they can set their own yeah, they can control their own rent. Oh, no. This is, so where I'm leading up with this is, do you support a state bank? A state-owned bank? Yeah, because what you could do is you could borrow money from a state-owned bank, or a city could borrow money from a state-owned bank, build housing, and they can control their own rent. And does that make sense? Okay, that's the whole thing there.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Next up is Shirley.
Thanks, everyone. It's really exciting to be here. My name is Shirley. I'm the owner of a coffee shop hair salon in Seattle, and I am also a strong supporter of Kshama's independent socialist campaign for Congress. As Justin and others have said, the rent is too damn high, right? That's true for working people, and as Kshama said, also for small businesses. The Seattle Times just reported last month on a so-called invisible crisis facing small businesses. This crisis isn't invisible, though, is it? We see clearly what this crisis is about. While the super wealthy continue to amass ungodly and historic profits they've stolen from the rest of us, we're left struggling for survival. That's right. That's exactly what it is. In fact, in the last 5 years, we've seen what economists call the greatest transfer of wealth in history. This transfer of wealth has also had a devastating impact. It has had a devastating impact on working people and small business. A new survey found that 67% of Seattle small business owners reported higher financial stress and precarity now than during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and 2021. And of course, it's not just Seattle, right? Small businesses across the country are struggling to get by. We're facing ever-increasing rents, major inflation on cost of goods, and as of last month, a huge spike in health insurance costs for all of us and our employees. So many small businesses that are integral to neighborhoods and communities are being displaced, and this is especially true for women and minority-owned businesses, which is why I am standing up here today in strong support of Kshama's campaign for Congress and her demand for commercial rent control, which is so desperately needed. Throughout her decade on Seattle City Council, Kshama had an unmatched track record of fighting and winning gains for working people and small businesses. In 2016, she organized a group of small businesses who were suffering from construction along a main drag in Seattle's Central District and won an absolutely unprecedented $650,000 in compensation for those businesses, despite serious opposition from the Democrats on City Council. Kshama also organized a progressive small business platform with dozens of small business owners, and she has been a consistent fighter for commercial rent control for small businesses, and this campaign is no exception. Let's talk about the Democrats, on the other hand, and their track record. They like to wax poetic about how much they love small businesses, and yet they do nothing to fight for the things that we need. And at the same time, they use us as cover to attack working people in the interest of big business. I've witnessed this regularly, this tactic, since I've been in business in Seattle. As just one example, in 2024, Democrats on Seattle City Council tried to undermine our historic minimum wage victory, a victory won by Kshama's leadership. They claimed that it was motivated by the concern for small business owners who were suffering sustained losses from the pandemic. This is a total farce. And Kshama mobilized working people to public comment and exposed their real intentions of not helping small businesses, but rather attacking workers, and they had to back down. In fact, every time the Democrats bring forward some anti-worker legislation, which is often, they use small businesses as their excuse. All of this in the interest of big business. And this tactic is not unique to Seattle. Across the country, Democrats play the same destructive game. During the Great Recession, it was the Democrats who bailed out the big banks and let working people and small businesses suffer the consequences. And again, when small businesses were suffering under COVID, it was the large majority of aid subsidies were going to big businesses, not small. Neither Seattle or DC Democrats lifted a goddamn finger to stand up for us. Nor have they been willing to take any progressive action to help small businesses, like expanding Seattle's Amazon tax, which Kshama also won, or fighting for commercial rent control. Both the Democrats and Republicans are the political servants of big business and the billionaires, not working people or small business. And that's exactly why we absolutely need to support Kshama's independent socialist campaign for Congress. She's someone who doesn't just campaign on these strong demands. She has a track record of using her campaigns and building movements, building the movements that are needed to fight for and win those demands. And there are a growing number of small businesses organizing to support this campaign because we recognize that Kshama is the only one willing to fight for the things that working people and small businesses need. And if you know any small businesses who would be excited by commercial rent control and excited by this revolutionary campaign, then please come up and talk to me afterwards. Because what do we want? Rent control. When do we want it? Now. That's right.
Thank you so much, Shirley. So next we'll have Ms. Cobb and then Danielle.
Thank you, guys. I don't work for the campaign or anything. I'm just a normal citizen like you guys. And, as we are, right? It makes me feel so good to see all you guys here. And I want you to know I've been seeing this all across the country. And so I'm so happy to be a part of a community. I grew up in Seattle until I got priced out. Seattle used to be so full of culture and love and unity and acceptance and for families and affordable. I still work there, but it's like a distant dream. It makes me sad every day I go there. I wanted to change that. And I've witnessed the changes that Ms. Sawant has done, and I'm so proud. But what I want to say today is that we're not dealing with politics as usual. And, and so we can't just accept the norm. We can't accept regular leadership that has led us to this road. There's so much damage that has been done. People's lives have been taken. That we need major change. Now, there's a saying that was from my elementary school. It said, if you reach for the treetops and fall, you'll land on the ground. But if you reach for the stars, you'll land on the treetops. We need to reach for the stars. That's okay. So,
Thank you so much. Next up is Danielle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle, and I've been a renter in the Seattle. Can everybody hear me? Okay. And I've been a renter in the Seattle area for the last 7 years now. And I, like so many others, have struggled to make ends meet as the price for rent and everything else continues to go up, but my paycheck remains the same. In fact, I'm even facing a potential layoff, so we'll see. But like many others have faced recently, our opponent, Democrat Adam Smith, has taken money from this exploitative real estate industry, which is not surprising to any of us, and Kshama has already spoken about this, including Blackstone, which is the world's largest private equity firm with $1 trillion in assets. After the 2007-2010 subprime mortgage crisis in the U.S., Blackstone Group LP bought more than $5.5 billion worth of multifamily homes, all to rent and be sold when the prices rise. But it's not just Adam Smith who is willing to work with these people. Unfortunately, even progressives fall prey to the idea that we need to make peace with the billionaires and the multimillionaires. As a socialist and as a working class renter, I strongly supported the demands that DSA candidate Zohran Mamdani ran on, which included a rent freeze in the million or so rent stabilized apartments in New York. But Mamdani has done nothing with his position, like the way Kshama has used her city council office and even post-city council office to win working class victories. Right after Mamdani won the primary election last year, the New York City Rent Guidelines Board met, and this is the board that decides rent increases in rent-stabilized apartments. By that point, Mamdani had a massive following and volunteer base, and he could have mobilized the tens of thousands of campaign volunteers he had to a mass protest outside of the Rent Guidelines Board meeting to shut it down and prevent the meeting and to prevent them from raising the rents. But he didn't, and instead, the board increased the rent right after he won the primary and became an overnight international superstar. And then, after winning the mayoral election, among others on his transition team, Zohran Mamdani appointed Jed Wolantis Jed Willantis is a billionaire real estate developer and the son of billionaire David Willantis. No socialist should ever have a billionaire on any of their teams, even a transition team. It's horrible. And Jed Willantis literally bankrolled both Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams against Mamdani in the New York mayoral Democratic Party primary. Jed Willantis is also the chair of the Real Estate Board of New York, otherwise known as REBNY for short. It is New York's most powerful real estate lobby group, and they viciously oppose renters' rights. They and other pro-landlord lobby groups like REBNY spent nearly $14 million over the last 5 years in lawsuits and lobbying to block tenant protections in New York. This is absolutely not how renters or working people can win, and Kshama's office is a direct contrast. I have 1 minute, so let me just share a personal story of how Kshama's wins helped me and my partner. So the $10 late rent cap fee, it's literally made it so that I can pay my rent each month. I can't pay rent at the beginning of the month. I have to space it out over multiple paychecks to be able to afford groceries. And if we didn't have that $10 late cap fee, I don't think I'd be able to make it work. When our building tried to raise the rent, Kshama's office won the required 6-month notice for any rent increases. So that gave us time to look for a place. We also had the option, because of Kshama's office, to set up a payment plan for the security deposit. I forgot that when you move, you have to pay like 3 more fees to move. And like, that's also expensive. So that made it possible. Otherwise, we would have had to move home with family and leave Seattle. And that's also what a lot of other people are unfortunately doing. Or if people don't have friends or family, they have no other choice but to live on the street. That is not their fault. That is the result of the vicious greed of the for-profit billionaire-backed real estate industry. And yeah, I have to wrap up, but I just want to say Kshama's office knew that we had to beat the billionaires. We can't compromise or make peace with them. Kshama mobilized thousands of working people in Seattle to pressure the Democratic Party politicians until they had no other choice but to give in to our demands. And we need that in U.S. Congress. We need someone to stand up to the billionaires and both the Republicans and the Democratic politicians who literally protect them. Yeah, we need to fight for rent control on the national level. Let's send a real working class fighter to Congress. Solidarity. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Next up, we'll have Josie and then Michael. And then is there anyone else who wanted to speak? And I got Calvin. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak who is not on the list yet? Okay, I think, yeah, after that, we'll have, oh, sorry, yeah, what's your name? TJ? Okay, great. So, yeah, next up is Josie.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Josie. I'm a state social worker, and I'm a member of the Washington Federation of State Employees, which is a public sector union here in Washington. As a social worker, I see every single day the immense stress and horrors that working people are facing, and some of our most vulnerable people here in the state of Washington. We desperately need rent control nationally without loopholes and a massive expansion of public-owned, quality, affordable housing. It is the least that people deserve to live with dignity. As a social worker, housing is by far the biggest barrier that I am working with people to address. And it's the hardest thing that families have to face. And in my 5 years of being a social worker here in Washington, I can't offer anyone any solutions anymore. You used to be able, You used to be able to actually get people on wait lists. You used to be able to get people into affordable housing. But the NGOs and the public resources that we have are just getting slimmer and slimmer as this housing crisis, as this affordability crisis is continuing to rise, and working people are being left behind. Yeah, exactly. What I am able to offer people is endless wait lists up to like 6 months. People who have low credit scores or who have a criminal history, they just receive rejection after rejection and aren't able to take any of these public supports. Federal housing vouchers or Section 8 vouchers are also almost impossible to obtain. The wait list currently lasts for several years, with some, like in Miami and San Diego, exceeding 90 months. Due to the high demand, lists often close, requiring applicants to wait years for reopening, or they use, for example, randomized lottery systems to select participants, which is what King County Housing Authority does. Wait lists for apartments run by the Seattle Housing Authority start at 2 years and can stretch out as long as 8 or 9 years. And there have been massive cuts to the even meager affordable housing that we have available locally and nationally. Since the 1970s, the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program has made it possible for millions of families to access quality housing by providing rental subsidies directly to landlords. Families with Section 8 generally pay 30% of their income towards rent, alleviating the burden of paying rents beyond their means and providing them with access to a wider variety of homes and neighborhoods. Of the more than 10 million Americans who benefit from Section 8, more than half are families with children. A quarter have a disability, and 1/5 are seniors. The program has been chronically underfunded. Only a quarter of Americans who qualify for Section 8 receive it. And now, despite the program's demonstrated success, Section 8 is at risk of significant funding cuts that threaten to displace residents, making housing more expensive to build and disrupt local economies. Trump is about to effectively cut all federal rental assistance by 43%. Boo! Without any additional funding sources, millions of Americans would lose their assistance and face evictions. Local and state governments are already being forced to fill the gaps left by premature expirations of the Housing Emergency Voucher Program and the significant changes to the Continuum of Care funding. A recent report from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities Project says that more than 400,000 households, including low-income seniors, veterans, and families with children, could lose their rental assistance under these Trump cuts. Here in Washington, the agency that I work for, we have access to Section 8 vouchers that we can use for families, both in King County and in Seattle. Actually, this program was just cut like 2 weeks ago. We don't have these vouchers anymore. But we get the option of referring people to housing in Seattle or in King County, which means you could live anywhere in King County besides Seattle. And originally, the thought process was I would refer people to King County because the rent is cheaper in King County outside of Seattle. But what I have found is that without the renter protections that Kshama Sawant City Council office won in the last 10 years, families are under threat of still getting evicted, still losing their homes. Even though the rent isn't as high, this is detrimental. Without the $10 cap on late fees, without a ban on winter evictions and for families, without a right to counsel, people are still losing their housing. And so even if it's more expensive in Seattle, because of the protections won by the city council office, won by Kshama's 10 years in office, families are safer. They can stay in their homes. The Democrats are also doing nothing about this. In fact, they have themselves instigated cuts of housing funding, as we saw in the Stepping Forward program that Kshama talked about in 2014, led by Barack Obama. Democrats just, like the Republicans, take money from real estate billionaires and the multimillionaires. And in fact, Section 8, like a program, is simply not enough because at the end of the day, it gives money to profit-making landlords. We need rent control, massive expansions of publicly owned affordable housing by taxing real estate and other wealthy people. And we need democratic public ownership of housing. Kshama Sawant's record of victories on the city council and massive victories that have changed lives for working people and also a strategy to win those victories are exactly what we need in Congress. And that's why everyone in this room should be behind and supporting this campaign. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Josie. Next we'll have Michael, and then after that, TJ.
Cool. Hey, everybody. My name is Michael. I'm a renter in Seattle. I'm a Seattle Public Library worker organized in AFSCME Local 2083 here in a personal capacity. Yeah, thank you. And I heard from my landlord that she was going to increase my rent, and she only gave me 5 months' notice. And so I called her out on it and was able to push it off another month, thanks to the 6-month notice in rent increases. And so that's over $100, in my pocket And I went and I talked to my downstairs neighbors about it too. There's 3 units in a house, and they'd all gotten the same date, and they didn't know about the 6-month notice, and so we were all able to push that back. And it's a little thing. It's a little thing, but it matters. You know, it matters to be able to talk to your neighbors, to be able to talk to your coworkers about, you know, what we can do to fight back against our landlords, against the corporate real estate developers. I think it's changing gears a little bit. I think it's really inspiring to hear about banning evictions on, you know, families that are being targeted by ICE. This is something that has been on my mind lately, you know, as especially in Minneapolis, where, you know, a lot of people are afraid to go to work, are afraid to leave their homes, at risk of losing their jobs, missing paychecks. You know, getting evicted would be a horrific outcome for these families. And as a member of the labor movement, you know, we're talking about what type of fight back is it going to take against, you know, the right wing, against ICE. And there was an emergency meeting earlier this past week by the Washington State Labor Council, where they were talking about, oh, we should mobilize our members to the Washington State Immigrant Solidarity Network, like rapid response trainings, which are quality trainings, but those are things that anybody can do. Those are things that anybody, you don't have to be in a union to go to those. We need to see organized labor act like organized labor, right? And actually organize strikes, mobilize their members to strikes. When Kshama was talking about gatekeepers, I couldn't help but think about my own union leadership, who so frequently, when we talk about the general strike that happened in Minneapolis, when we talk about what will happen, you know, when ICE comes to Seattle, you know, they talk, well, there's a no strike clause, you're not allowed to go on strike. And that's shameful. That's absolutely shameful. That's right. That's right. So, like, facing, you know, all of these crises compounding at once, you know, where do we start? You know, it starts with knowing your neighbors and telling them, don't pay that rent increase a month early. It starts with, you know, talking to your coworkers and introducing a strike-ready resolution in your local, or passing an endorsement for Kshama Sawant in your local. You know, and if you're not in a union, it's about talking to your coworkers about unionizing. And it starts with knocking on doors here in Kent, here in Renton, here across the district, because this is a campaign that can galvanize our communities into fighting for so much more than we've been pigeonholed into in the past, that we've been held back from fighting for in the past. So anyways, that's why I'm out here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. TJ is up next, and then after that, Dom.
Welcome to Kent. We need some help here. Thank you, Kshama. I was first aware of Kshama Sawant about 2010 when she was doing the Occupy teach-ins. For a decade and a half, she's been out there. 15 now, Angle Lake, Sage Wilson, DSA, Kshama Sawant, boots on the ground, moved it over the hill. Thank you so much for coming to Kent. I've been a little bit in the streets here and there over the years, and the class war. Their side's winning. When we push back, that's when they accuse us of being a class warrior. I would love our economic professor maybe to one day tell us more about the rentier class and rent seeking, how it's not even a capitalist thing, it's evil, it's a cartel. Commercial landlords, our commercial brothers and sisters who are trying to run a small neighborhood business, they can't go down the road because landlords are talking to each other. Your rent goes too high in your apartment, you're not getting taken care of. Kent's really hard with that because we have the least amount of tenant protections in King County, here in Kent. Where I'm staying, if I miss rent by a day, it's a $75 per day late fee, per day. And Kent has more evictions per capita than anywhere. Welcome to South King County, we can use your help. The rentiers are doing very well for themselves. If we all put our hands in our pocket, that's how labor has the power. You know, I mean, it's the money. Negotiate every day. Friction in the machine. We may not have $1,000 to add to the campaign. Talk to your neighbors. Go to your city council meetings. Make sure your mayor, your council members not only know who you are, but what your issues are when they see you walk in the door. Their policies affect us when we go home. You know what? Their policies should have a social cost for them in their neighborhoods. That's right. Their neighbors need to know who they are, why they're doing what they're doing, and we can figure a lot of this out just by going to the PDC to see who's paying their bills. Adam Smith claims to be one of the poorest members in Congress. Either he's lying to us or he's corrupt as hell and he's incompetent. I don't know what it is, but if he's been there for 25 years and he's not a multimillionaire like he claims he's not, I'm not buying it. But anyways, thank you. We need the help. Talk to your neighbors. Get out there. Understand economics, rent seeking, the cartels. RealPage, you want to rent down the road because your landlord won't teach you? They're all on RealPage saying this guy can pay this much or they can pay this much. That's collusion 101, you know? Let's the rent seekers and the wealthy get jobs and take care of themselves. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, TJ. Next up is Dom and then Ben.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Dominic Wolfgang Wallace, and I'm a working class renter in Seattle, Washington. I'm also a Lumbee Indian, a federally recognized indigenous tribe in North Carolina. Thank you. Indigenous communities are amongst the poorest in our country, and that is an economic condition that I've inherited for sure. Because of that and the horrendous cost of living in Seattle, I've struggled to pay my rent from the very moment I moved to the city. Particularly in fall of 2024, I had lost my job, and it took me a few months to find another one. In that time, I had eaten up all of my pitiful savings of like $200. And by the time I had a job, I was 3 months behind in rent and effectively destitute. Had it not been for the ban on winter evictions won by Kshama during her time on the city council, I guarantee my corporate landlord who owns my unit would have tried to evict me. And what's more is the only reason I was able to bust my ass at work, skipping meals, and make the money to pay the back rent I had was because of those $10 caps on late fees. If it was $75 a day, I probably would have been on the streets. Yeah. As a member of the indigenous community and a working class person and a socialist, I feel a personal commitment to fight to end the severe rates of poverty and homelessness that indigenous community members face. Centuries of discrimination and inequality have been part and parcel of American capitalism and imperialism and have resulted in widespread housing instability and housing crisis among the indigenous communities in the states. Natives experience the highest rates of homelessness in the United States. According to the U.S. government office, when median rent increased by $100, homelessness rose by 9%. From 2001 to 2003, median rents increased 23% after adjusting for inflation, while renters' median incomes rose just 5%. They stole 17% of our wages. Homelessness is directly linked to skyrocketing rents, which in turn is directly linked to the insane profits by billionaires and multimillionaires from Wall Street, finance, real estate, the rental market, and construction. According to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Indigenous Americans, along with Hispanic or Latino or Asian American and Black communities, have experienced the largest increases in homelessness since the years since the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. I walk by the homeless every day in Seattle, and it's one of the few places left you can see the diverse Seattle Ms. Cobb was talking about. It's legitimately the place I see my fellow natives the most. Factors like rising rents and a slower job recovery rate have contributed to homelessness amongst natives who are already more likely to be severely rent burdened. Additionally, Native Americans experiencing homelessness may face more barriers to accessing emergency resources, resulting in higher rates of unsheltered homelessness. Homelessness and overcrowding are two sides of the same coin and a result of a horrifically unaffordable housing industry. Because Native families tend to take in friends and relatives, housing insecurity in Indian country often translates to overcrowding rather than direct homelessness. According to a 2017 federal report, around 16% of natives living in tribal areas experience overcrowding, defined by more than one person per room, which includes dining rooms and kitchens, compared to just 2% of all U.S. households. That's why I'm fighting for rent control across this country, for a massive expanding of affordable housing, and all of that paid for by taxing the goddamn rich who are profiting off of it. Thank you. This fight is linked to the overall fight to end the oppression of Native peoples, which began before this country was even founded. That is why I am a socialist. Working people need to be united as a class across all ethnic divides and national origin if we are to win any change in our lives. Ours is a united fight against the billionaire class. That's also why Kshama, as a socialist city council member, fought for both renters' rights and indigenous rights from the moment she entered office. In her first year, she won the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution in 2014, working alongside thousands of Native activists who had been fighting for that for years. She also won unprecedented renters' rights, too many to name, that disproportionately helped our Native communities, our Black communities of Seattle. The poorest amongst us, like me and my family, have the most to lose from this cost of living crisis, and I see Kshama Sawant as the only person fighting for us today. I know for damn sure it's not the Democrats, and it's not fucking Adam Smith.
Thanks so much, Dom. Next up is Ben, and then Natalie, and then Calvin, and then we'll go back to Kshama. Welcome up, Ben.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for sharing, everybody. It's really powerful. It's hard to not get emotional with everybody sharing their stories and how it affects all of us here every day. My name is Ben. I live in Seattle, but I work as an engineer in Renton and also in Kent, just 5 minutes up the road. I'm often here at the Kent Community Center as well. And my coworkers here regularly talk about struggling to find affordable rent and buying a home. And we're engineers, we're reasonably well paid, and we're working for a company that's owned by the third richest man in the world. Also, yeah. And the issues, we've talked about this. The issues of staggering house costs have bled from downtown Seattle to across the county. Rising rents have pushed more people out of the city and in search of any reasonable accommodation they can find. This is the same reason that when I lived in New York, I paid nearly $1,000 a month for less than 100 square foot room. 30-minute ride into the borough in a food desert surrounded by working class families, and a corporate landlord could charge me almost $1,000 for basically a closet. And I'm really excited actually about the expansion of the light rail into Kent and Des Moines, because we really desperately need like convenient, frequent mass transit options. But it's really hard to not consider the sprawling effect that has on our housing costs. The longer that these landlords are allowed to exploit our needs, the more our wallets will continue to take a hit and the further we're going to be pushed along. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about, TJ brought up this software called RealPage. Give a little bit more information about that, because I think it bears out some flaws in this kind of like free market system that the landlords kind of want us to believe in how rents are set. So at the end of last year, a class action lawsuit was settled for over $141 million against various property management companies for using this software, RealPage. This software gives pricing recommendations to these companies. It amasses large amount of data from these companies to allow its algorithm to determine the highest possible rent that they can charge. And these companies are here in King County. We've got big landlords, Kshama mentioned, Greystar, Equity, Essex Property Trust, Avalon Bay, like all these crazy names of that own up all all of the communities, the apartments that we have in Seattle. They boosted to landlords that they could outperform the market 3 to 7%. And this was true even for some apartments that were left vacant for a long period of time. The logic there is that renters would get discouraged by the sustained higher prices and eventually are forced to accept them. And I know we've all experienced kind of this acceptance over these rising rates as well, what other choice do we have? So Greystar alone controls at least 102 apartment buildings in the greater Seattle area. And as TJ mentioned, they can call up there's a lawsuit that says that the employees were meant to call up the other landlords in the area and go into the software and manually bump up their prices that they charge for rent based on what the competitive landlords were charging. And I don't know, it really pisses me off to know that like there are these companies that are basically colluding away our hard-earned dollars. I mean, this is the money that we need every month to pay for our food, to pay for our family's clothes, for our health care. And this is just like money that's being reported on a fucking earnings call for a real page for this software that lets these corporate landlords push us further and further out of the city. I'm supremely impressed by the many wins that were accomplished in Kshama's Seattle City Council office, and as we've been talking, we desperately need that fight here in Kent and across the county and across the country because we know that this is a nationwide issue. I'm going to continue to volunteer for this campaign that will put corporate landlords on the defensive and win the rights to housing that we deserve, and I hope you all will as well.
Thanks, Ben. Next up is Natalie and then Calvin.
I'll try to keep my own time well. I've been a bad timekeeper because I'm just so excited to hear what everyone has to say. It's great being in this room with all of you, and I want to just kind of share my experience as a renter and also a fighter for all of these rent protections, and also just as a socialist. I'm Natalie. I'm a member of Workers Strike Back and Revolutionary Workers, and I've been a part of many of the movements that Kshama has put forward. I have lived in rat-infested buildings with sewage leaking from the ceiling, with rent increases spiked on top of that. Just this year in the place that I was staying, I was without power for 3 weeks. And these are the things that corporate landlords will absolutely try to get away with. About the power outage, I specifically learned that that was on the landlord. They needed to install the new box and just kept saying it was the city's job and giving us the runaround. So this is what they will fucking try to get away with if we don't actually check them. And I think that that's important to know all of the wins that we were able to have here in Seattle that do protect us, not here in Seattle, but in Seattle. The things that do protect us and do make us safer as renters, but they absolutely are not enough. What Kshama was putting forward of public housing is the thing that we actually need, the thing that will actually protect us. And I want to say that through like a lot of these movements, I have seen just massive, like electrifying wins, right? Especially the $10 rent cap. Everyone said that was impossible, that was not going to happen. Yeah, exactly. When working people get together and fight back, nothing is impossible. We can move mountains when we fight together. And I think that that's important to remember, that through all of these wins, they are like a way forward, a foot in the door, a way to fight back and get more people organized. That is the power I've seen in working with the movements that Kshama's put forward, and working with working people on these shared projects, is that we can do anything when we work together, and that we need to actually keep building that, always building on top of these movements. And that political track record is the tool that we have. right now. And if we are able to win this council office, we can use it as a foot in the door, a wedge, a weapon for the working class to put these policies forward nationally, to put forward a strong socialist program nationally, and be able to organize the masses of working people across the country, because that's what we need in order to win any of these goals: rent control, free healthcare for all. Anything that we want to win, we have to do together, and we can only do together. There is no other option. They will not save us. We have to do it. So thank you very much.
All right, our last speaker for public comment is Calvin.
This has been an awesome meeting. We had larger meetings early, had a big rally early in the campaign, but this tops all of the events I think we've had so far. It's been incredible. So I want to go back to what Ms. Cobb said earlier. Hope I'm getting your name right. And so she said that we cannot meet this political moment with ordinary politics. We are not going to stop the ICE horror show, the Trump horror show. We are not going to stop the skyrocketing rents. We are not going to stop war after war from this fucking administration, backed up by also the Democrats. We're not going to change any of this on the basis of electing a few more progressive Democrats, whatever the fuck that means anyway. We need class fighters like Kshama Sawant in Congress. We need them everywhere, in every city council, in every state legislature, because that is the only way that things are going to change. Unfortunately, we only have one at the moment. We need to make more. I want to talk about, there's been a bunch of the victories that Kshama One already mentioned. The Amazon tax, the highest minimum wage in the country, a bunch of renters' rights laws were mentioned. One of my favorite, even though it wasn't one of the biggest, was the Carl Hagelin law. It's named Carl Hagelin. It's named after a slumlord who sued us after we won, and he lost that too. But we won this because this is just an example of how Kshama used her office. So he tried to raise rents on working class and poor tenants by 100% from 1 month to the next. And this was in a building where there were like bugs creeping out of the walls. There was mold all over the walls as well. It was just the people's stoves weren't working. The place was fucking falling apart. And he was trying to raise rent by 100%. To drive people out. Many of them would have been driven into homelessness. So what did the renters do? So they reached out first to Bruce Harrell's office, who was the council. This is former Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell, who was at that time a council member of the 2nd District. And so these renters reached out to him, and he completely ignored their message for, I don't know, many days or weeks. And then somebody thought, oh, well, we should go ahead and contact Kshama Sawant's office. So what happened next? Kshama and her organizers in the city hall, because that's what they were. They weren't just city council staff. They were organizers. So they went and they organized a protest. They organized a press conference. They organized working class renters from around the city to go after this motherfucker, excuse my language, Carl Hagelin, the slumlord, to go after him and to take him down. He was forced to retract that. And then we passed this legislation, which makes it illegal to raise the rent in any building where there are housing code violations. And that is still stands today. And we need that law everywhere as well. And so how is it that we were able to win victory after victory after victory at a time when workers were suffering defeat after defeat around the country? It's not only because Kshama as an individual is a principled, unbending, relentless, unambiguous fighter for working class people and the oppressed. It is not only that, it is because she is prepared to use every tool at her disposal to organize working class people to fight back in the most effective way possible, relentlessly, until they win or until they do as maximum damage to the fucking political establishment. Because that is what it takes. Because they don't care. They don't care if we come to city council and we say nice things about how, well, we would really like you to do the right thing here. We're having a hard time. Let me tell you my story as a renter. Let me tell you my story of living in this neighborhood. They don't care about any of that. They're happy to say, thank you. Thank you for your public comment. Thank you for your remarks. They have no problem with that. What they don't like is when we organize people in the hundreds and thousands or tens of thousands, and we go out there and we call out their bullshit. We say, that's not true. What you just said, that's not true. You are backed by corporate landlords. Here are the donations you're receiving. if you do this, we are going to do everything possible to make your lives hell or drive you out of office. And we are prepared to build a stronger and stronger movement until you pass this thing that we're fighting for. And it's not enough just for us to say that. We have to actually do that, because they don't care about empty threats. What they do care about is a rising tide of struggle of working class people. And that's what scared the shit out of them. Excuse my language here. That's what scared the shit out of them in Seattle over a decade. And that is why they're going to do everything possible to try to stop us. There are going to be public attacks. There are going to be all kinds of stories made up. There is going to be a vicious onslaught against Kshama Sawant in this campaign, because the last thing on earth the billionaires want, the corporate landlords want, the Democrats want, and the Republicans want is Kshama Sawant in Congress. And the best way to ruin all of their nights is to win this fucking election.
That was awesome. Thanks, Calvin. Thanks, everyone, for your contributions to the discussion. I'll hand it back to Kshama to sum it up and answer any points that came up. So welcome, Kshama, again.
That was really amazing. I totally agree with Calvin that we've had larger meetings, we've had big rallies for this campaign, and they were all awesome. They were filled with working class people, but the energy that we're seeing here, that is incredible, and we need to take that with us to the streets, to the tables, to the doors. We need to convince hundreds of thousands of people and explain to them that this campaign exists for them. So one of the questions that came up was, Bruce, you're still here. Yeah. You were saying that excessive rent is bad for the economy. I mean, I would just say that, and this connects with what TJ also was saying about, well, rentiers, having rentiers is not capitalist. In reality, all of this is capitalism, and excessive rent is not good for small businesses like Shirley, but excessive rent is very, very good for the vast majority of the capitalist class. And actually, if you look at who owns most of the wealth, like who owns most of, if you just look at the NASDAQ listings or S&P 500 listings, whichever stock market listings, if you look at any company that is publicly traded, and then you look at who owns it, because it's all public information, who owns the majority shares, it's always the same, whatever banks or whatever they call venture capitalists. It's BlackRock, it's Geode, it's State Street, yeah, exactly, all of them. And then if you look at who owns the most of the money in BlackRock, Geode, State Street, all of them, it's the same billionaires. So if you think of any billionaire, and it doesn't matter if the billionaire is a tech billionaire like Mark Zuckerberg, or some a billionaire in the health insurance or big pharma or construction, or billionaires who are profiting from Palantir, killing people in Palestine and also benefiting from ICE terror. It doesn't matter. All of these billionaires make money from all of the exploitation, all of the war, all of the bloodshed. They're all together. And so as Dom was saying, we also have to unite as a class because they are all together. We shouldn't see them as separate in the sense that they all profit from all of the evil that happens under capitalism. And having rentiers is very much part of capitalism. And the other question was about, do we support a state-owned bank? Absolutely, we do. In fact, on the city council, we actually pushed for it. And this is another story of the Democratic Party doing, sort of having performative, like whatever statements, as Shirley was saying, they wax poetic about all kinds of things. They wax poetic about state banks. There's this Democrat called Bob Hasegawa in the state legislature. If you look at his, statements for the last 30 years, he loves talking about the state bank. And on the city council, alongside the indigenous community, after we won the Indigenous Peoples' Day, we won a series of victories alongside indigenous activists. And one of those victories was a divestment of the city of Seattle's funds from Wells Fargo Bank, because it's one of the most evil banks. I mean, they are all evil. It is not a question of good apples and bad apples. They are all bad. You want to say something? Yeah. The state has a right to counsel, what you're talking about. They actually, the state legislature has passed a right to, protection for renters from eviction and all of that. But as far as whether that will be funded by that measure or not, it all depends on how much money there is. The problem is that the tax law that you're talking about is so minimal compared to the giant needs of the state that there is no way, in terms of basic math, it's not going to work. So there's 100 other needs that that working people have. So there is no way that it's going to be fulfilled because the tax is so small. Exactly. Is every penny of taxes on the rich important for us? Absolutely. We have to fight for everything. However, if totally, yeah. And it actually goes to the other part of Bruce's question also, which is, shouldn't we just fight for public housing, in the city? And absolutely we should. And which is the biggest source of funds for city-level public housing? It's the Amazon tax, and that is something we won. Amazon tax. Amazon tax is the biggest single largest pool of funds for city-owned public housing. It raises hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and in fact, in addition to the big pool of big Amazon tax that we won, alongside that, the same year we won a separate victory as part of the whole victory, which is a separate pool of funds from the Amazon tax specifically for Black working class and poor families to be able to come back into the Central District. Is that enough? No, it's not enough. But it is the biggest pool of funds that was won, and it was won through the kind of fighting strategy that Calvin and many others talked about, and Justin and others. It was very, very hard fought, and it was hard won. And obviously the Democrats were against us. Obviously the Chamber of Commerce and Jeff Bezos and all the billionaires and multimillionaires were against us. But some of the people who played the most vicious role against the Amazon tax were what I call the BLM misleaders. When the whole movement was marching for racial and economic justice, all these self-appointed Black leaders said, oh, you can't say tax Amazon because that's not a Black issue. That is a classic, yes, this happened. This is a classic example of gatekeeperism. So had we accepted, and I faced slurs like, well, you're not Black, so you don't get to speak for Black people. Yeah, I know. I know. Exactly. That is exactly what we said, that you're Black, but you're against the needs of Black working class and poor people. I'm not Black, but I am. I'm sure as hell fighting for everybody who needs affordable housing and who needs it disproportionately the most. It is Black and Indigenous people, just by statistics. That's an indisputable fact. But here's the deal. It is not facts that are going to win the victories. We do need to know facts. We need to arm ourselves with all the knowledge possible. But what wins working class victories are not facts and theses and studies. It is a fighting strategy. And a core part of the fighting strategy that we absolutely needed, that was part of the backbone of why we won the Amazon tax, is having the courage and the clarity to not allow these BLM, I call them misleaders because they're not leaders, they're misleaders, preventing them from using identity politics against Black and other working class people. So what we said to them is that you as individuals don't speak for the entire BLM movement. This was in 2020. This wasn't the whole reason this all came up was because we were fighting for the Amazon tax, and then the George Floyd rebellion happened, and a lot of people told us, "Oh, you just need to stop this. You need to stop talking about tax Amazon because you need to give space to some leader who's going to sell out." We refused. We refused to accept that. We said we don't listen to gatekeepers. our loyalty and my loyalty is not to this or that singular black person. My loyalty is to the working class as a whole, which includes black working class people. So we said, we're going to go directly to the protests and the ordinary people who are out there marching and ask them what they think. And the Tax Amazon petition clipboards were practically flying from our hands because people were saying, fuck yeah, I want to tax Amazon. But the reason I mention that is because we are going to run into that type of gatekeeperism again and again and again. They're going to say, who gets to speak for this section of society? Who gets to speak for them? And the goal is to confuse people into thinking that, oh, this person, because they have the same skin color as you, they speak for you. But this other person who may be white or Indian or whatever, they don't speak for you. We have to, I completely agree with what Dom said, that the only way and perhaps once in a while you might run into a question where a genuine person who even this campaign but is feeling discouraged and they ask you, but what can I agree with you, this is great, we need to support this campaign, but what can one Congress member do? Even if she wins the election, what can one Congress member do? There's hundreds of Congress members and senators. It's a cesspool, which it absolutely is. Washington D.C. How will we change this? And we have to remember, this is not change under capitalism does not come from some basic or simple arithmetic. We didn't win these enormous earth-shattering victories in Seattle by having lots of people on the council. It was just one elected office that we had. All the 8 others were Democrats. They were all representing the interests of big business. Nobody was speaking for working people until we were elected. But with that one elected office, because we had the strategy of organizing the mass of working people, we were able to win. That is the same strategy that we need to take to the Congress. But the main point here is that that is precisely the strategy that is missing from the whole landscape. I mean, Nina said, there is no illegal strike. It's only a question of whether the strike wins or loses. That's the only question here. But what do we see all these union leaders doing, as Michael said? The leaders of these unions, literally in Minneapolis, I'm sorry, it was not a general strike. They want us to believe it was a general strike, but it is not a strike, let alone a general strike, unless you shut down the profit machine of the bosses. A protest is not a strike. And yes, there were mass protests in Minneapolis, and they are clamoring for a general strike, but the obstacle is the union leadership, which is acting as a gatekeeper, and the leadership of the biggest public sector union, AFSCME, which some of you are members of, Josie and others, and Michael, the leadership of this union in the Minneapolis area was circulating no strike clause language from their union contracts to their members saying, be careful, don't go on strike because you might get fired. So, first of all, let's call them out for even accepting no strike clauses in the contract. Going on strike and shutting down the profits of the bosses is the only real weapon that the working class has. And here you have union after union. It is not a unique thing in this union. Union after union where their leadership have accepted no strike clauses. Basically, telling the workers, yeah, you're going to be pummeled and pummeled by the bosses, but we are going to make sure you don't get to fight. So that's but that's the problem with the no strike clause is the logic of the same union leader who accepted a no strike clause in the first place is, it sort of leads towards, not allowing a strike because there's a no strike clause. But the teachers in West Virginia in 2018 showed that even if the strike is technically illegal, if you have the mass of workers on your side, you can go on strike. And they did go on strike. They went on strike not only facing the opposition of the very horrific Republican-led state legislature, which is deeply anti-worker. They went on strike facing the opposition of their own union leadership, telling them to go back to work. And they went on strike, and they won. And in fact, they won so big that even after they themselves won victories, they refused to stop the strike because they wanted those wage increases and benefit improvements for all public school workers, not just teachers, and they were able to win that too. And the point of mentioning all this is that there is a desert. There's an absolute desert of real political leadership. We are in a very tragic situation in the American working class where people want to fight, but there is no leadership to lead us. That is why this election is so crucial, because it is not about electing one person and then that person goes and does meetings. It's about using a congressional platform, which I guarantee you, if we elect the first revolutionary socialist in the belly of the capitalist beast, that is going to be international viral news. And if we can win that, it will be an unbelievable weapon for the working class to launch all kinds of mass fights, and I have no doubt it will have international impacts also. I'll just end with the TJ's really important, thing. He said, well, the billionaires can get jobs. That's exactly right. We cannot win socialism or even substantial increase, better things for working people under capitalism by not defeating billionaires, but certainly we cannot have a socialist society coexisting with capitalism. That is why, as revolutionary socialists, we are fighting for the overthrow of capitalism. And there's this famous cartoon where Karl Marx, one of the first people who brought all of this science forward. There's a cartoon where some guy, some fucker is asking him, well, if you win this socialism, then who will clean the toilets? And Karl Marx says, you will. So let's move forward. Let's fight for this election. It is really, really important. It comes down to one day at a time. We have had a phenomenal meeting, but that is not enough. We have to take all the inspiration that we have gained from one another here and translate that into campaigning so that hundreds of thousands of people hear about our campaign and then actually get involved and they vote for us. The primaries on the first Tuesday of August. We have a lot of hard work ahead of us. Solidarity. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you all for coming out today. It's been an incredible meeting. Let's fight to elect Kshama Sawant to Congress so the working people have a national leader who will go to war against the billionaires and their political servants in both parties. Please talk to our campaign organizers, donate, get merchandise, and sign up. And if you like this event, our next town hall is going to be Sunday, March 1st at 2 p.m. in Renton about the fight to shut down ICE. Who wants to come to that one? That's awesome. We'll end with a final chant. When I say we fight, you say we win. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. All right. Solidarity, everyone.